All right, so picture this. You wake up one morning and you grab your phone, want to check the weather, and nothing. No signal. You hop in the car to go to work and your GPS is out.
Right.
You want to see what's happening in the world, but no internet connection.
Yeah.
What's going on? Well, what if the culprit was actually a chain reaction of collisions up in space? It's called the Kessler syndrome.
It might sound like something straight out of science fiction, but this threat from all this space junk is actually very real. We're talking about like dead satellites, used up rocket parts, even just tiny little pieces of paint, all just zipping around the Earth at crazy high speeds.
Yeah, it's wild, right? You see those pictures of Earth from space, that beautiful blue marble against all those stars.
Right.
But it turns out that pristine view is getting kind of junked up.
Yeah.
So just how much junk are we talking about up there?
Well, the numbers are pretty staggering. We're tracking tens of thousands of objects that are bigger than a softball. But there are millions more tiny pieces that are just too small to even track.
Oh, wow.
And here's the thing. Those objects are flying around at speeds up to 17,500 miles an hour.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah, so even something as small as a fleck of paint could absolutely wreck a satellite if it hit it.
It's like a cosmic freeway where everybody's driving blindfolded, going way too fast.
Yeah.
No wonder there have been so many close calls lately, especially with the International Space Station.
Yeah, exactly. The ISS has had to dodge debris a bunch of times already. And these incidents, they really highlight how serious this is becoming. And it's not just a problem for the astronauts up there either.
Right.
If some important satellite gets taken out, it could mess with all kinds of things down here, like GPS communication networks, even financial transactions.
Yeah, so this isn't just some far-off problem.
Yeah.
It could really mess with our everyday lives in a big way.
Absolutely.
But before we get into all that, let's rewind a bit. Where is all this junk coming from in the first place?
So there are a few main culprits. One, accidental collisions between satellites, like that big Iridium Cosmos crash back in 2009.
Right.
Created a ton of debris, and then you have exploding rocket parts, leftover stages that weren't meant to fall back to Earth safely.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, some countries have done those anti-satellite weapon tests.
Yeah, I heard about those.
Which are a really bad idea because they make a huge amount of debris that stays up there for a very long time.
It's kind of a mess, huh?
Yeah.
That 2009 collision alone made almost 2,000 trackable pieces of debris.
Yeah.
And then that Chinese rocket breakup just last month added even more to the pile. It seems like it's just getting worse.
Yeah, that's the scary part. As we launch more and more stuff into space, the chances of these collisions just keep going up.
Right.
And that brings us back to that Kessler syndrome we were talking about.
Okay, so let's break this down. You mentioned a chain reaction. What does that actually mean?
So the Kessler syndrome is basically like a tipping point.
What?
You get more collisions, which makes more debris, which then causes even more collisions. Okay.
And eventually it could get so bad that there's a thick layer of debris around Earth, making space travel basically impossible.
So like a domino effect, but on a cosmic scale.
Exactly.
And are we really in danger of reaching that point?
That's what scientists are trying to figure out right now.
Oh, well.
There's no clear answer yet, but some experts think we're already seeing the early warning signs.
So is the danger the same everywhere in space?
Not really. Altitude is a big factor in low Earth orbit, where the ISS there's still a little bit of atmosphere,
Okay.
and that helps to pull some of the debris back down to Earth.
Okay.
But further up, where a lot of our communication satellites are, it can take thousands of years for that to happen.
Thousands of years. Wow. So this problem could stick around for generations.
Yeah, that's right. The choices we make today about this space junk will have consequences for a very long time.
But it's not all doom and gloom. There are things we can do about it, and we'll dig into those in the next part of our deep dive. So welcome back to our deep dive into space junk and that, that looming threat of the Kessler syndrome.
Right. Last time we kind of left off on a bit of a cliffhanger. We were talking about how that runaway chain reaction of collisions could make space travel a lot harder, maybe even impossible.
Yeah, and it's not just some, theoretical problem for future generations to worry about. We're already seeing the effects.
Well, like we talked about the ISS having to dodge debris.
Right.
What are some other real-world things happening because of this space junk?
Well, the money part of it is already a big deal. Every time a satellite has to move out of the way of debris, it costs money and it shortens its life.
Right.
And if a satellite actually gets hit and destroyed, that's a huge financial loss, not to mention all the services it disrupts.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how much of our modern world depends on these satellites. I mean, everything from GPS and communication to weather forecasting and even like financial transactions.
Right, it's all connected.
Yeah, it really shows how vulnerable we are. We depend on all this space technology, but we don't often stop to think about what would happen if we lost it.
Exactly.
So what can we do about it? I mean,
Yeah.
is there any way to clean up this mess, or are we just stuck with creating this, impenetrable shell of debris around the planet?
It's not an easy fix, that's for sure. But there are a bunch of potential solutions people are working on. One promising area is debris cleanup technology.
Okay, so we briefly talked about that ADEO breaking sail from the European Space Agency. What are some other ideas out there?
Oh, there's some really cool ones. Like some people are looking at lasers.
Lasers.
Yeah, using lasers to kind of nudge debris into a lower orbit where it would burn up in the atmosphere.
Oh,
And others are working on robotic arms and nets that could grab bigger pieces of junk and bring them down safely.
well, this sounds like something straight out of Star Wars. Are these things really possible?
Well, they might seem far-fetched, but the technology is improving fast. And considering what could happen if we do nothing, it's definitely worth investing in these solutions. It really comes down to global priorities.
So it's not just about having the technology, it's also about the political will and countries working together to actually use it.
Exactly. No one country can solve this problem on its own. It needs to be a global effort, something like a space environmental protection agency,
Hmm.
to set standards and make sure everyone follows the rules.
Okay, so we talked about the UN's Pact for the Future. Is that a step in the right direction?
Well, it's a start, but it's mostly voluntary. We need more concrete action, like international treaties that set clear limits on how much debris we create and require satellites to be disposed of properly at the end of their life.
But some might argue that even these voluntary agreements are helpful because they get people talking and working together.
That's true. Any progress towards cooperation is good. But we also need to think about individual countries, especially those that are big players in space, like the U.S.
Right.
They have a responsibility to set a good example and put stricter rules in place for their own space programs.
So it's a complex problem with a lot of different pieces. We need new technology, international cooperation, and responsible policies from individual countries.
Right. It's a multi-pronged approach.
And it's not just governments and space agencies. The companies launching these satellites need to be part of the solution too.
Absolutely. They need to design satellites with the end in mind. Like, how are they going to get rid of this thing when it's done?
Right. It's like that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If we can stop creating so much debris in the first place,
Yeah.
that's a huge win.
Exactly. Designing satellites that can deorbit themselves or be easily captured and removed, that would make a big difference in the long run. It's about building sustainability into the design from the very beginning.
Okay, so we've talked about technology and agreements, but what about us regular people down here on Earth? Is there anything we can do to help?
Oh, absolutely. It all starts with awareness. The more people understand the problem, the more pressure there will be on governments and companies to do something about it.
So just talking about it, spreading the word, educating ourselves and others,
Yeah.
that's a good place to start.
Yeah, exactly. And we can also make choices as consumers, support companies that are doing things the right way, advocate for responsible practices, maybe even donate to groups working on cleanup technologies.
Right, it's about being mindful and making choices that reflect how connected we are to space.
Exactly. It's about protecting our future and making sure space stays this amazing place for exploration and discovery for generations to come.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. A little scary at times, but it's also empowering to realize that we can all play a role in solving this problem.
Yeah, it shows that even these big global challenges can be overcome if we work together and have a shared purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope it sparked some new ideas and encouraged you to learn more about space junk and what you can do to protect our precious space environment.
Remember, the future of space is in our hands.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe to the deep dive and leave us a rating or review. It helps others find the show and join the conversation. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world around us. So welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring, this growing threat of space debris and the possibility of that Kessler syndrome.
Right, right. And we've talked about, how it happens, the potential consequences, even some cool solutions in the works.
Right.
But there's this other side to it we haven't really gotten into yet, like the human side of things.
Okay, I'm listening. What do you mean by the human side?
Well, think about it. Imagine a world where those amazing pictures of Earth from space, those iconic ones,
Yeah.
they're not possible anymore because of a thick layer of junk blocking the view. Or imagine, our telescopes can't see clearly anymore because of all the debris and we can't learn as much about the universe. It changes how we see ourselves and our place out there in the cosmos.
Yeah. That's a good point. Right now, we think of space as this wide open frontier full of possibilities. But if it gets too dangerous or we can't get up there,
Right.
that could really change how we view things.
Totally. And it's not just about, humanity's place in the grand scheme of things. It's about how this affects future generations. Culturally, what happens to our dreams of space travel and colonizing other planets if we basically build a wall around our own planet?
That's a pretty heavy thought.
Yeah.
Like, we'd be trapped by our own progress.
Yeah, in a way. But the good news is we still have a choice. We
Right.
can decide to make space sustainability a priority. We can put our resources into those technologies and policies that'll help reduce the risks.
And that brings us back to something we talked about before.
Yeah.
Individual actions matter.
Absolutely. Even if you're not a scientist or a politician, you can still do things.
Right.
It starts with being informed, talking about this stuff with your friends and family, supporting organizations, working on solutions.
So raising awareness, making smart choices as consumers, and maybe even getting the next generation of space explorers to think differently about how we do things.
Exactly. We need a change in mindset.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing space as this endless resource, we got to start treating it like a fragile ecosystem that needs our protection.
Well, I gotta say, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It makes you realize that even these issues that seem far away like space debris can have a big impact on our lives and our future.
For sure, it's a challenge, but it's also a chance for us to come together as a global community and come up with creative solutions.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe this will push us to be even more innovative and resourceful in how we explore space.
Maybe it'll force us to rethink space travel altogether, find ways to do it sustainably and responsibly.
That's a good note to end on. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into space junk and the Kessler syndrome. We hope you found it as interesting and thought-provoking as we did.
And remember, the future of space is up to us. Let's make good choices.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe to the deep dive and leave us a rating or review. It helps others discover the show and get in on the conversation. We'll see you next time for another fascinating look into the world around us.